lot of feelings about this for a kid thing because I wrote in my newsletter, so not to like self-quote here, but when I was a kid, I was also obsessed with makeup. Like I would play in my mom's makeup, I would dress up. Like that's like a very natural thing as you're, as young as 8 or, and I had lip smackers. Like that is not new. But the fact that it is an influencer who has so she had a pop up in the Mall of America. No, sorry, the American Dream Mall. And police came, like it was a crazy thing. Girls were lining up at 4 a.m. There was a TikTok that I embedded that was a girl who didn't know how to read was doing a haul. So she was
Oh my
like
God.
holding something and she was like, and this is well, I actually don't know how to read. Mom, what is this? And it's just like.
Welcome back to hip replacement number 25. It is September. We took a little break for Labor Day, which we got our rest. We're back. Because our 25th episode, we have someone who is spiritually 25, because I think we're all spiritually 25.
I'm a multiple
who
of
comes
25,
by way,
but yeah.
yes, comes by way of Ben, even though I know who this person is. And anyway, but Ben, who is our guest? Tell us all about
Oh
them.
my God! I mean, as if our guest needs any introduction at all. The inimitable Casey Lewis. Casey, of course, who people know from her widely read and widely cited after school newsletter, is also a friend of mine for the last few years. I encountered Casey first through a Monday media diet that she did for Why Is This Interesting, and was taken by it and reached out to Casey cold and said, "Hey, you seem awesome. Will you join me on my podcast, Sick Talks?" And Casey very generously obliged. And then it turns out that we're kind of neighbors, even more so today than we were at the time, and have just gotten to be buddies. So I don't know. I find Casey's like unending curiosity and expertise about Gen Z in particular, like really inspiring. And obviously all of the stuff she covers really fascinating. But beyond that, I also, I really appreciate Casey for being just lovely and generous, and like she is as well liked as she is well read, and so it's really nice to have you here, Casey. Welcome.
Nice, thank you guys so much.
Yeah,
happy to have you. And what an intro. I hope everybody should have an intro like that. That's amazing.
I'm speechless.
Well, listen. It's not exactly James from Throwing Fits, but we'll work our way up to that. Well, Casey, we as you may know, you are of course the Gen Z expert and a millennial yourself. But one of the things that we try to do on the show is bounce around a little bit between, of course, the complaints and foibles of Gen X. As well as just getting into kind of intergenerational talk. And one of the things I wanted to start with was this story that happened in the New York Times or was published in the New York Times over the weekend about farmers in Sullivan County, which is upstate New York, about 2 hours, and how the future of farming is changing across as the sort of generational succession of farmers falls away and new people get involved in farming. And that story, it cited a pair of hippies who bought a farm in the 60s or 70s and have been up, growing the land since then. There was a tech entrepreneur, a finance guy who left the rat race to build a farm, and then there was a classic sort of multi-general upstate farm. What it made me wonder essentially was how we see family businesses going into the future across generations, and whether it feels like we are moving totally away from that because it feels like we hear about it less and less, or whether there's any sort of return to it as the future gets more uncertain, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Any POV?
That's a deep question.
I don't know if you...
I'm a deep thinker, Kyle.
I feel like
True.
Kyle doesn't know this about me. Ben, you may, but I come from a family business. My last name is Lewis. Lewis Brothers Funeral Home has been in my family.
Oh, wow. I didn't.
That's an incredible family business too.
I
Yeah.
sort of, and I sort of come from one too. The Dietz Lantern Company was a lighting concern for 150 years. It
Holy
was
shit.
sold before when I was a teenager, but yeah. So okay, so anyway, sorry, Casey, I
I
cut you
don't
off.
have
Go
No,
ahead.
that.
no. But so it's something that I think about a lot, just having grown up with, my dad took over his father's business, who had taken over his father's business. And then I don't know if you've seen 6 Feet Under. It's actually quite accurate in terms of like what
Hmm.
it's like. And my brother and I both, as we were in high school, I knew I wanted to move to New York and be a writer at like 13. And that was, I'm a squeamish person. That was just never like an interest to me, but I kind of felt like my brother like thought about it here and there. But my town is 3,000 people, and it came down to like not just being kind of ambivalent about the work, but not wanting to stay in the
Hmm.
small town and wanting to
Sure.
but it is something that I've thought about because the funeral business, like sort of farming and other businesses, like it's a really good industry to work in. It is not, it can't be AI-ified, like there's
Sure.
certainly innovation, but it's a really reliable business. And just as, we see more and more headlines around, HVAC company, different trades, so many of those are family businesses. And I do think it is
Hmm.
interesting as, so Gen Z, graduating into the worst job market, since 2008. It's very interesting to see, kind of like a look back at these family businesses, and that suddenly they're appealing. Suddenly people are looking at them in a new light.
Kyle, how does it seem to you from your vantage, from your
I
expat
mean,
perch?
this is all fascinating because like that is the family business of it all was not what jumped out to me in the story, even though like obviously that was a bit of it. But like it I do think there probably are people who, I think even going back to what you said, Casey, you're like, I knew that I was going to move to New York in XYZ, and I feel like there's a similar thing that happened, I think specifically for millennials, and I think it's probably true for all generations, modern generation. I think probably Gen X experiences, Gen Z probably in some ways did too, where it was like when you chose to sort of like go on a path that was outside of the quote unquote norm, particularly as it relates to say college and higher education, it was like no, you need to go and like do something practical. And like my parents are like that. They're like, you need to study English and become an English teacher because if like your writing or acting doesn't work out, then like you need a job. And like that's a classic story. And I have many friends who worked in entertainment who were like, my dad said I should be a pharmacist. And then now it's sort of like Hollywood has crumbled in a lot of ways. Like I have one friend in particular who mentioned that story years and years ago as a joke. And now she's like, should I go to pharmacy school? Like, it's an interesting thing now because like a lot of these sort of the things that we were told like you need a backup to now are hypothetically not options anymore unless you sort of like have something set. So like that to me is maybe where like to the point of the story in a lot of ways is where the family businesses may sort of like become a thing or just sort of like starting to think about like I saw somebody in TikTok make a video about this that is fascinating and I wanted to think about it more is that like, a lot of cities and a lot of industries are going to become sort of like what Detroit is. So then what does that mean
Hmm.
for like what does that mean for all of us? And what does that
That's
mean
okay.
for like,
Well, okay. So let's talk about it. I mean, just very, very briefly, when you say what Detroit is, that means like a
losing
shell
the
of
auto
itself.
industry?
Well, because
Yes.
it
And
lost its
like
anchor industry, but
yes.
there is an argument to be said, and I'm haven't been to Detroit in a number of years, but there is an argument to be made that Detroit is also a certain kind of American answer to Berlin because it
Hmm.
is there
Oh
is
yeah.
so much space, there's so much access to the globe through an international travel hub, and there is so much um, like opportunity to essentially define your own path there. So that's kind of interesting. Like,
Hmm.
I guess, Casey, part of what I was interested, what interested me about having you on the conversation in particular for that story was, okay, so supposing that we lose Gen X from the farming ecosystem, we lose Gen Y from the farming ecosystem because we don't know. Does the Gen Z impulse to touch grass, quote unquote? I hate, by the way, how touch grass is used as code to do anything. It's ridiculous to me, but whatever. I'm old and crotchety. But like, does it feel like that impulse to touch grass starts to bring people back into the great outdoors, or is it more economic reality, like the sort of non-disruptability of offline skill sets?
I think it's both. I mean, Kyle, I think you and I have similar FYPs. I see such a reoccurring sentiment of wanting to step away from the computer and discover like grandma hobbies or these sort of vintage pastimes, things like that. And I also think, the trad wife, trad family conversation, like all of these things are related. Not saying that the Gen Z farmers are necessarily trad wives, but there's just this larger desire to step away from the computer, to spend the day making sourdough bread and, sort of returning to like a slower pace.
Well, the thing to that is like, and that this is going to be a question for you, Ben, is that like exactly what you're saying, Casey, and I'm sure you know people like this too. Like I know a lot of people like this. Like it was a very millennial thing, and like that story to me was about that is like the millennials who sort of like left the city and like left the tech, left the big career to start over because they were sort of done with it. And they wanted to have more of a quote unquote real life. They did it all like, and that takes different forms. But I think like, in no small part, like sort of like my move to Europe was that version of that. And I think like
Right.
there, a lot of people have that. And even like people who I know who left LA, that was their version of it too. So like, I all this to say is like, I think it's a very millennial thing. I think Gen Z might be doing it a little bit earlier. They'll probably end up doing it around the same time, and like it really will sort of echo maybe like millennial doing their startups, and like this is sort of a different version of that. But the question I had for you, Ben, was like, was this a moment in Gen X life where it was like we gotta get out of the workforce, like we gotta like not necessarily be a farmer. It's a very millennial cliche to do the farm or the pet rescue or the coffee shop. But like, was there a moment like this for Gen X?
I don't think so. I mean,
Interesting.
no, I don't think, I mean, from my standpoint, like there were people who set out on their own paths, but that was because they were sort of fed up with dealing with the system, or because they had achieved a level of success and they were able to, they were operating in like lesser gravity, in other words. Yeah, I don't think there was ever a sense of like, I have to do this as a means to find a path to the future. That might have been, or that might be, I mean, I will actually, I want to modulate that by saying though, that I think that's happening now a little bit, like I think the extent that we identify with the millennial mindset, it's to the extent that you're like, all right, the bill of goods that I was promised maybe isn't as certain as I thought it was, and so I have to be a little bit more, resourceful. But I say that as somebody who's, on the younger, the sort of tail end of Gen X, and so it may just be my, Stockholm syndrome, being surrounded by millennials all the time.
Look, I would say that to me, what I'm hearing is that like this isn't necessarily generational. It's of this moment in time in human history, and like because I know other Gen X people who are like, I know one, for example, I think who is like works in Hollywood and is like, I just want to move to the middle of the country and open up like a vintage store, and like that is like that could have been a millennial, it could have been a 25-year-old who said that, but like that is like.
Look, I mean, the three of us are, we speak from a particular place because the three of us are all in long-term stable relationships where you found your person, right? And so if you upped and moved to some place where your life costs half as much or a quarter of as much as it did now, and you continue to work remotely and whatever, like it's easy to imagine that. And it's easy to sort of daydream about it. I then will go sit and have brunch on the corner of Greenpoint and Franklin and go, I never want to leave, because I want to be someplace where I can just watch people walk. I went to the Armory show yesterday and just tripped out all afternoon on the people and all of the weird cohorts and contingencies, all of that stuff. Like, I don't ever want to be away from that. That to me is lifeblood. But it's pretty easy to rationalize. Like, yeah, I'm gonna bounce. Um,
I think we're
go
also
okay.
coming from a perspective, all three of us too, where we not to say none of us feel a 9 to 5 grind, but we're
Mm.
not commuting to an office. We're not having to do that. And so I do think part of it is less about Gen Z as a cohort and more about this, young 20s. They're in a job where they, maybe is a little thankless. And suddenly they're thinking, wow, I'm spending my whole day inside this, this bleak office and just clocking in and clocking out. I would rather be doing all of these other things. But I think, we know that to run a vintage store in the middle of America would be a pain in the ass too. Like,
Hmm.
not to say it wouldn't be thankless, but to be a farmer, that's a lot of work. And so I think like you always, it's you idealize what you kind of don't have.
Exactly.
So
That's the
okay,
sort of thing that I always say when someone's like, I want to open a coffee shop, I want to do the dog thing. It's like, are you comfortable with like you're gonna go from like I am six-figure city person to like you're making coffee and someone's yelling at you? Like, are you gonna handle that well? Because like you're gonna get humbled real fast and like you then have to wake up the next day and do it. You can't call out. You own the place.
so that leads me to something that I thought was really interesting, which is this post on the Still Wandering that apparently went mega Substack viral. I mean, this is a guy with 4,300 subscribers who got 6,200 likes uh, on a
Wow.
piece about the death of the corporate job, and it was interesting because reading it, it's written from the standpoint of someone who is quite sage about trends within work and some of the pressures about like email jobs and managers to manage the management process and all of these sorts of corporate bureaucracy inefficiencies that we roll our eyes at and complain at and then willfully take part in when we can, right? The the essence of the piece is like the corporate job is headed to an obsolescence because it is so wasteful. But what's happening is that young people are using corporate jobs, the heat shield that their corporate jobs give them to then start their own millennial pet care businesses or
Hmm.
artisanal chocolates or whatever it is. The thing that so anyway, I think there's something that's worth discussing in the argument in and of itself, right? Um, are we headed for a broadly speaking an era of unbundling where large corporations inevitably sort of get broken up into tiny pieces, maybe not tiny pieces, but smaller pieces, so that they can be more actionable and each of the and employees can have better stakeholders, this kind of thing. That's one thing. But the other thing that struck me about this was like the self-assuredness with which this kid in his 20s wrote about the trends. And it reminded me of seeing the music market very clearly when I was 24, what was going to happen circa Napster, how labels worked, all of this stuff, what the implications were. And I wonder, is it the precocity of or precociousness, I guess is a better way to say it, precociousness of youth, or is I don't know. Do we kind of know exactly what everything is at 25, and we're just then working it out for the remainder of our lives?
I think that your question is not specifically about the Substack algorithm, but I have noticed that a number of the posts that tend to go viral on the Substack, like, feed remind me of things that are written by young people who are definitely working through it in real time.
Oh,
Hmm.
And
interesting.
it
Yeah.
reminds me a little bit of pieces when I was in my 20s reading Thought Catalog.
Oh yeah.
I felt like
Sure.
writing, was, not great writing, but I felt like it was so candid and raw and putting into words things that I was feeling myself. And then you kind of age out of that and you look back at it, you're like, oh, that is someone's diary entry, masquerading as content. That wasn't quite the question, but I do think it's been very interesting to see, to sort of, I spend a lot of time on TikTok and I see young people working through things on that medium, but it's very different when it's long form. And do 25-year-olds have it figured out today? Did they 10 years ago? Like, I feel like no, but there's also just such an awareness of what's wrong with the workplace and the
Hmm.
sort of corporate
Yeah.
environment. And I do think Gen Zers feel uniquely empowered to speak out against that. And there's like less of a fear of, when I was young, working at Condé Nast, spending so many hours in the office, I was just grateful to have a job. And I wouldn't dream of like putting something on the internet. I mean, it was a different time. Like, you didn't share your thoughts about your work on the internet at that time. So, yeah, I this isn't an answer for you, Ben, so much as some thoughts.
No, but it's a set of weak signals around it. Kyle, where do you land on this?
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting because like part of me is like this is a dream fantasy world of like, we all sort of would like the corporate world to go away, and like I think in many ways parts of it will, but like it so many other scaffolding around culture and life and work has to come down in order for like that idea to come true.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
think to me the thing that like it sort of gets at, and like I was pulling things to me right about this weekend, is like about the sort of like the idea of like the fun gay job. It's very similar, where it's like I'm a creative director or now I'm a strategist, or like in ways like a chef. It's like this sort of like this person who sort of does something that's very vibe based, and you just get to be yourself and someone pays you. And like that's the Gen Z dream job, because it's like I need
Yeah,
money, I gotta work.
what's the fun gay part about? I don't understand the gay part
Well,
of it.
it's
Is
like a
that
lot of
just
these jobs are held by like fabulous
gay
gay men.
people? Okay,
Yeah.
got it. All right, I
Yeah.
understand.
That's like
Okay.
it's like, I want like a dumb gay job. It's like I want to be a creative director where I just get to like wear fabulous clothes
Right.
and
Okay.
like put
Right.
on good
I want to
outfits.
be Troye Sivan in the Idol.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's
got it.
exactly
Yeah.
it. It's like that's why I
Okay.
want like, they want to sort of like, yeah, exactly. It's a vibe based job, but like it's that to me is becoming more of a Gen Z like thing versus like, yeah, they all want to like quit the job and like get it to go away,
Right.
but they also know, which is different or in a lot of ways somewhat similar to the thing that I think you were talking about, Casey, is like I'm lucky to have a job. Is that like if I must work, like can't I just do something where someone just tells me all my thoughts are amazing and I'm beautiful and that I get paid for it? Like that's not real. And like in a lot of ways it's not real. And I think like the sort of in some ways like this small signals of like people starting to question like why is everybody all of a sudden a strategist? Like that is sort of like a sort of response to like, you know, that to me I feel like is gonna like start to collapse where it's like, do we need all these people just sort of like be vibe based? Like can the AI do that? Like I hate that. I think that is awful. But like I feel like that's like increasingly going to become a thing. Like let me tell you on that really quickly. When someone tells you, and I've had more than one person tell me this, and I was like, okay, is like them tell you like, oh
Oh
yeah, I had
boy.
Chat GPT talk like you and think like you. And I was like, oh,
The, the
cool.
worst. The worst. The
I
worst.
mean, it's impressive, but I never even thought about that. But I was like, huh, you
Well,
never
you, I
know
mean,
people. Yeah.
you are very. I mean, in Casey, you're voicey too in your newsletter. But Kyle, you're especially well, maybe not especially voicey, but you're quite voicey, I would say. And so yeah, it does for someone who can't naturally put words together in the way that you do. I would imagine there must be an interesting temptation to be like, I love this. I wonder if there's a way I could do it, and then drop it
And
into
then
the Chat
yeah,
GPT
there
machine.
then there
You've got a
are like
really
clones
real
of us
pale imitation.
within, yeah, clones of us within every company, and then we all sue ChatGPT.
And then what though? Like
Oh,
then what? Then
Yeah,
everyone is thinking about thinking like Kyle, thinking as if they
yeah.
are Kyle.
it's yeah.
You
Go
know,
ahead, Casey. Yeah,
something else
yeah, yeah.
while we're talking about AI, just something I've been thinking about lately is and you guys consume vast amounts of content too. So I would actually be really curious to know what your reaction to this is, but I've started reading things and I'm talking about on the cut on like on
Mm,
actual and have real bylines, and I think there's just simply no way that this isn't at least partially AI. because of the way that the sentence structure is. But then
Hmm.
I start to go spiral a bit and think like, am I just now believing that XYZ, this kind of sentence structure is an AI,
Mm-hmm.
sort of like the M dash tell, where we all
Yeah.
know that that's not a true tell. But now everything I'm reading, I'm questioning. It happens a lot on Substack because who's to say that people, but every piece of writing, I'm interrogating like, is this is this human writing or is it AI?
Yeah, yeah. We, I mean, it's funny you should say that, Casey. I don't feel like I run into that in journalism universes, particularly not ones of repute. But I don't look for it either, and it's the sort of thing where I'd
Mm.
imagine, like, I get a lot. I read a lot of marketing decks, and I see it in marketing decks. Like, it's so blatant and obvious that
Yeah.
it's, you're just sort of, it's kind of amusing, and so the counter there is to use weird turns of phrase or to whatever. But it is the fundamental problem. The idea of everyone sounding like how the fundamental
Mm-hmm.
problem is that these systems are inherently backward looking, and so
Right.
they cannot be
Yeah,
novel. They,
yeah.
like, the I was reminded just now of the somebody's tweet. I don't know whose it was. It was you know AI by definition cannot fuck around and therefore cannot find out.
Right.
And
That's
which
great.
Great.
yeah, is a really, it's like smart encapsulation of it, I think, in some ways.
But then I
Anyway,
guess if
yeah.
if if the trend cycle, if everything old is new again, if the trend cycle, is what it is, is looking back okay? Obviously not, but what are the
I think
limits?
no. I look, as all the future is built on the foundation of the past, right? That has always been true, will always be true, but it is not determined by the past, right? It is indicated or influenced. So, well, Casey, speaking of that, one of the things that I was really surprised to see in your newsletter from today, right? This is the big weekly roundup that you do for paid subscribers, was the story about Salish. How do you say that young woman's name?
I believe it is Salish. I do know that it's named after an area in Seattle. I think a river or a lake.
So this young woman is named after a. Okay, got it.
And I'll
Now I
tell you
understand.
the only reason I know this is because I went so deep into Reddit, and the only instances of this word Salish were in Pacific Northwest, like
Hmm.
in,
Yeah, sure.
like
Yeah,
hiking Reddits, and
we
then
we
YouTube, family
Yeah.
vlogger Reddits.
we were Marcel and I were watching a lot of Twin Peaks before Campbell was born, and we were going to name him Snoqualmie, but then it got. Yeah, I'm only joking.
Passing
Seriously, Mr.
door or
Campbell.
sliding
Yeah,
doors.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so anyway, Salish is a teen or tween influencer whose father is a YouTube personality and who has set her up as a sort of like mini beast sort of beauty influencer, right? Is that the broad?
Yes. So I'm by no means an expert. I had never heard of this person as of a week ago. But I started, a couple of people sent me the headline of, Sephora's launching a beauty brand in partnership with a 15-year-old influencer. Beyond the sort of like headline, I didn't see any sort of details on it. And I'm like, who the hell is this? Like, not to say that I'm well versed in like the tween vlogosphere, but
Sure.
to never see that name just felt sort of strange. And so my understanding, and I'm sure the Gen Alpha parents listening can go deeper or correct me if I'm wrong, but her father had been a photographer turned family YouTuber, and now his channel is far and away just her. So
Okay, got it.
32
Mm-hmm.
million followers, and she also has a YouTube page, but the majority of her content lives on his, and it will be like, this boy has a crush on me. And it's like, truly imagine Mr. Beast if Mr. Beast was a tween girl trying to optimize for tween girl eyes. But then what's super interesting
Sure.
about that is, she's 15, but the content, just as with Mr. Beast, it's not 15-year-olds consuming this content. It's people significantly younger. So it's like when my mom first allowed me to get a teen magazine when I was 11. I was obsessed with teen magazines. My friends' older sisters had teen magazines. I begged for years, and finally at 11, I was able to get 17 magazine. And so, that's just the way that youth content is. It always, the kid wants content a little bit older. Anyway, so yes, Ben, that's my understanding.
Well, okay, so what was the corollary, and I have a couple of questions, but the corollary to me was, I was at the Armory Show yesterday, like I said, the big art fair in New York, and I was walking through and I ran into a friend of mine from high school who works as a producer of fashion shows, and she said, "Oh, I'm going to see another mutual friend of ours from high school who I didn't realize works at an art gallery in Chicago." And we went over to see him, and we were talking about our kids, and he said, he was talking about Campbell, who's 19, is in college, and Harper, who's 16 and is in high school. And he was saying, "Is your daughter obsessed with cosmetics? Because my 10-year-old is obsessed with cosmetics." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't think she's obsessed with cosmetics. I mean, I guess she wears a little bit of eye makeup and, eyelashes, mascara, that sort of thing. And I guess she's at Sephora right now turning in a gift card with her boyfriend." Yeah, actually, I guess she is really into the whole beauty thing. It was this funny realization of like, oh, there's this undercurrent of stuff that even though I talk to Harper, every day and a fair amount about lots of different stuff, like there are these parts of her world that are just a little bit impenetrable to me. And to think that there are industries with billions of dollars of sales and millions of people following that are just sort of invisible. That was one of the things that struck me about both your discovering of this thing yourself and then also of the business. I don't know.
But I do have
Anyway.
to ask, was she there to get Road, which just
No,
launched? Do you
no,
know?
I don't know. I
Okay.
don't think so. She showed me the stuff that she got, and I don't recall Road being there. Yeah, that was another thing. I saw that the Road drop brought the kids to the yard.
Yeah. I just had to opportunistically ask.
Yeah, I don't. It was not Road. She did tell me though that she got it. It was her birthday on Monday, the day that hip replacement was off, and she did get a birthday gift from Sephora because it was her birthday recently when she bought something yesterday. And she said, "Oh yeah, a lot of girls get their boyfriends to sign up for Sephora accounts so that they can get the free gift on their birthday from their boyfriends." So good to know that the hustle persists. Well, okay, so Casey, what does this indicate? That we've got 15-year-olds entertaining 7-year-olds through their 32 their fathers. YouTube channels.
I have a lot of feelings about this Sephora kid thing because I wrote in my newsletter, so not to like self-quote here, but when I was a kid, I was also obsessed with makeup. Like I would play in my mom's makeup. I would dress up. Like that's like a very natural thing as you're, as young as 8 or, and I had lip smackers. Like that is not new. But the fact that it is an influencer who she had a pop up in the Mall of America. No, sorry, the American Dream Mall. And police came, like it was a crazy thing. Girls were lining up at 4 a.m. There was a TikTok that I embedded that was a girl who didn't know how to read was doing a haul. So she was like holding something and she was like, and this is, well, I actually don't know how to read. Mom, what is this? And it's just like, so it's
so
and it's like I don't think there's anything problematic about young girls, with facial serums and spending money at Sephora. Like that's just it's an access thing. Like there wasn't Sephora everywhere when I was a kid. There were also not beauty vloggers that I was seeing on, being exposed to. But the thing that kind of I find a bit unsettling is like exactly how her content is optimized for engagement from this crowd who's too young to read, much less understand that they are being explicitly marketed to. And then you add the layer of like these are ostensibly beauty products, even if they are skincare. And so the idea of like perfecting your like it's just it's a lot, when you think about 4-year-olds watching this.
The thing I was going to say is like when I read your piece, I remember that era of like the lip smackers and the whole economy of like these sort of like, for tweens and younger, like to perform makeup and to perform sort of like self-care, beauty, whatever we want to call these rituals. And like I think the difference is that like, look, and again, to the point of like kids playing with parents' makeup, is like that's a tale as old as time. Like that's like that has always sort of existed. Like case in point, like mom, the classic scene in Mommy Dearest, like yeah, like that has always sort of been a thing. But like I think the difference, and like, you know, you wearing lip smackers and like Christina Crawford putting on her mom's makeup have more in common than what these kids are doing. Because like what these kids are doing is like it's not a pretending of what an adult is doing. It's actually sort of like an active participant in the culture in a way that like it's useless, obviously. Like they don't need it. And like it is performative in a lot of ways, but like it functions differently. Like it's not for fun. You know what I mean? Like because previously it was for fun, and now like these at younger and younger ages, it's the same thing of like, you know, my mom didn't let my sister wear heels, quote unquote, until she was a teenager because she didn't think that was age appropriate. Like it goes back to that picture of like Northwest from a few weeks ago where people were like, she looks like she's 35, and like it's not a critique on parenting or Northwest, but it's just like that bar sort of like it's lowered and different and all sort of weird in a lot of ways, but like
Yeah.
that is, I don't know if it's concerning or not. It just is. Like
Well, it's interesting to think that like as the Overton window for the age at which we can do things expands, the age at which everyone is supposed to do things sort of perceptually shrinks, right? Like this is ballasted by I ran into a buddy of mine at the Armory show yesterday who is like me, 50, and was just like, oh yeah, I go out and skate every Saturday at the TF in the East Village, and then every Sunday I go to this ledge over in South Williamsburg. He's 50. He's skating as hard or harder than he did when he was a teenager. I can tell you that for sure. It's kind of amazing. By the same token, you've got that whole story in the cut last week about the forever 35 face, and then you've got a 35-year-old Northwest who's what, 11, 12, something like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because she's as old as my nieces, which like my nieces are like watching Wednesday and playing Roblox. They're not like dressed to go to the club with their mom, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, Wednesday's fairly sophisticated. Do you mean Netflix Wednesday, or is there some other Wednesday that I'm
Netflix Wednesday? Which like, but even then, like I was talking to people about this yesterday, is that like even then, like the new season of Wednesday, and this is a big conversation about Hollywood, is that like it took too long for that season to come out. So like now, like my niece and nephew, or the people who love season 1 are like, that's for kids.
Wow.
So like,
that's so interesting. I gotta try that. I'm gonna try. Sorry to cut you off, Kyle. I'm gonna try that out with Harper tonight because we have a father-daughter something viewing scheduled tonight, but we don't have a topic at hand. And we watched the first series we watched as a family, and so I'll see if I can get her to dig back in and see what she thinks.
Okay.
What shows have you done, Ben?
Oh, I mean,
with her.
Of late. I'm sort of hard pressed to think of anything of late because she's very much a teenager now. She's very much her own viewer. She's very much like, the funny thing is, ironically, she's like, so she's got this boyfriend who she really likes and we like, nice kid, and who spends a lot of time with her. And she's like, yeah, Dad, I maybe tonight I'm going to play Roblox with Ike. And it's, so they play Roblox, meaning they just sit there on computer and talk, right? It's the same as being on the phone for 3 hours when we were kids.
Same as every generation.
Or when I was, but except that there's pixels moving in front of them. But yeah, I can't think, Casey. That's a good challenge for me. I can't think of the last.
Is there
thing. Whereas with Campbell, Campbell will sit and like for instance, we watched The Substance. We watched no, we've watched a bunch of movies anyway. He'll have to chime in and tell us in the show notes.
Well, I think on the topic, I mean, speaking of The Substance, but also to talk about, and not to like take hosting duties here, you guys. But
no, jump in, please.
Hit replace it with Casey. Go ahead.
This is a trialogue. Remember? It's
yes.
It makes me think of the TikToks that Kyle referenced of what year did you go to high school, which I found to just be astounding in comparison to the Forever 35 story and
Hmm.
the and
Yes.
where and
Yeah.
for those who haven't experienced this, Kyle, do you want to tee it up since you
Well, yeah. There's this trend that comes around every summer, and like it ostensibly only takes place in used car dealerships of America, where like somebody walks around and is like, "What year did you graduate from high school?" And they're like, "Oh," and it's like a person who's like, it looks like they have seen the sun every day of their life, and like all their hair went away 10 years ago. And then they say, "Then what did you go to high school?" And then they go, 2007, and you you have like an existential crisis for them where it's like, what happened to you? And it's like 30 people in a row who all look like that, and it's wild. And like, so this is trending, and it all trends in a lot of different ways, but like to what you just said, Casey, and to the point of the tweens as well, is
yeah.
like it gets at this idea of like who gets to age, like who does and doesn't get to age. Like, because when I was watching that, I was like, we're talking over here about Forever 35 and how Gen Z looks old and how millennials aren't aging, but like we're clearly talking about very specific ones. We're talking about the ones in the cities, the ones who probably don't have kids, or who have maybe access to not have to, say, sit in the sun and watch the kid play soccer. Like they don't have to experience the sort of like the effects of the sun on your face every day, like you might at a used car dealership, for example. But like to me, that's what it got at, which like it gets at this sort of like, Northwest dressing like a 35-year-old versus my nieces watching whatever versus, a 7-year-old playing the soccer that should be watched by the parent versus the 7-year-old who is can't read and is advertising for a product. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like
Yeah.
age is in a really funny state right now, and it's
Yeah, for
like
sure. Well,
it's for all age groups. Like, it's out everybody.
yeah, no, for sure. Hence this discussion every week, right? Is just
Yeah,
trying to
well,
make
true.
sense of all of the ways that we lap over. Well, Casey, all right. So, as the appointed Gen Z expert on the pod, we've kind of rounded our way back to the Gen Z of it all this week. What's jumping at you, especially other than the stuff we've talked about amongst the Z's?
At this moment,
Yeah.
I, I think the most interesting thing in talking about Gen Z is, especially in my research, because I've been spending so much time watching back to school hauls, and
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
just such a gap between the younger Zs
Mm-hmm.
and the elder Zs, because the oldest Zs are not buying houses necessarily, because we've all seen the headlines around that, settling down, getting married, having babies, because what is it, like 28, I think is the oldest now. And then when you think about the youngest being like 15, like it's such a wide
Yeah.
variety of people. And so that it kind of cracks me up, like to think about, like, what is a Gen Z takeaway? Also, can you guys hear the construction that has just started downstairs?
Don't worry about it.
Ish,
We're
but
not
who
audiophiles
cares?
on here. We're
Okay,
not
okay.
It's fine.
Um, can you hear it?
No,
Like
No.
drilling or something. Okay.
no.
But yeah, we're just talking about such a wide swath of people, and people in very different life stages. What's interesting about the Z's right now is there so many schools this year took away phones. And so they're all
Right.
grappling with what is it, I've seen TikToks, and Kyle, I'm sure you've seen these too, where it's like, how am I supposed to know what my class schedule is without having my phone?
Mm-hmm.
Just
Well, it's so funny. Harper. So we asked her to, and when Campbell lived here, we did the same. It was like we asked her to yield her phone at 10 when she needs to go to bed, and we'll put the phone downstairs. And the last 2 nights, the phone hasn't fully charged. It's only charged to 70% because of some weird thing with the charger that's going on. And she's like, "Yeah, but it's okay. It's not. That's enough time to get me through the day," because she doesn't have her phone
Mm.
during school anymore. And whereas
interesting.
last
Interesting.
year that would have been a meltdown territory,
Yeah.
and this year it's like, yeah, actually it's okay. So it's just it. Well, anyway, I don't know, a little bit of anecdotal evidence here, but they seem to actually be surviving without these devices.
Right. Well,
Shock and
actually,
shock and surprise.
that sort of proves this sort of like there's an ongoing sort of like really hot debate. I'm sure we all have seen it and all talked about it. Is this like should kids be online? which kids are allowed to be online, what age, what does that look like, the YouTube verification thing to the Roblox drama to there was Australia sort of banning it and like facial recognition and all these sort of things. And it to exactly that point, Ben, is that it really doesn't affect them that way. Like they're as malleable as any
That's
human
right.
is. And
That's
like
right.
it really like it is a drama pain point right now. And like I think to the point of the TikToks, like, yeah, it's like it is something right now on this day that will trend, but like it's not going to be it will not last, I don't think. And I think that's the sort of thing that like is refreshing, at least, is the elasticity of the brain, is that like, yeah, like this really affected me today, but like this sort of bounce back from that is hypothetically even more profound. Like, should kids be not allowed online at all? I don't think so, but like I do think we're getting at a moment right now that like is a very clunky version of what the whole like what was that book last year, that really annoying one about like
The Jonathan Haidt
the
one.
the
The
anxious
anxious generation.
generation
Yeah.
one. Yeah, it's like it's getting like that, whether it was because of that book or not, like those things are actually happening now, which is really interesting. And like, yeah, we're seeing what's happening in real time, I guess.
I think the thing that is most interesting, though, yes, humans are malleable. Yes, we sort of we figure it out. But, at least this is the parent sort of POV that I hear is, but their brains are underdeveloped. Like, what if they can't figure it out? What if the
Right.
elasticity isn't there? And I've been talking to a bunch of Gen Alphas for a project that I'm working on. And it's been so interesting to have, kids as young as 4 I've been interviewing, oftentimes with their parents in the room. And to hear it really, we see this play out in stories about this topic, but parents are very much taking like two sides where it's like the no screen time or 1 hour a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then others who are sort of like, I'm a busy parent. Like I have a
Right.
job to do. Like, and it's going to be fascinating as we sort of go on to see, are they going to be the same? The kids who had
Yeah.
1 hour of screen time, the kids who had infinite screen time. Certainly, people are going to be more developed than others, but how much will this
Yeah.
shape
Well,
things?
I think I think, I mean, my bets on they end up roughly the same, but the edge cases do give us the Gen Alpha version of Footloose, where the kids who are banned from screens get together and play
Right.
Roblox together in a triumphant repudiation of the church, something like that.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my God. All right. Well, guys, we're coming to the end. Kyle, any final thoughts here from having had the week off to pontificate or to ponder? You can now pontificate.
No, well, I think that was just on my mind, is like what would be the sort of Gen Alpha Footloose title? Is it like Block Loose? Like what would it be called? Like what would we call that? Like we can't just leave that there and not give it an actual name.
Yeah.
Roblox
Oh
loose,
boy.
blocks loose, craft. No, I
Blocks
don't know.
knock loose. Yeah. We're gonna end up naming our hardcore band, actually, is what's happening. Yeah.
Hey,
Snapchat, Snaploop.
Snap.
That is, for a future for an offline discussion. I was reading today that the head of one of Snapchat's senior people was like, yeah, the future of Snapchat is in creators, which will be an interesting
Huh.
road to see them
Sure.
try to explore. Because Harper uses Snap constantly, but it's a messaging app. It's nothing but a
Right.
messaging app, and it's nothing but, and not only that, it's like the most ephemeral, not even in terms of like disappearing messages, but just like it's a picture of me sticking out my tongue. That's it. Like it's proof of life. And
It's like
so
a
the
walkie-talkie.
idea. Oh, that's it. Yeah, good analogy. Good analogy. All right, Casey, final thoughts.
That's it. Great analogy. That just like changes how I've thought about Snapchat.
It's not. It turns out it's not a camera company. It's a walkie-talkie company.
It's a
Yeah,
walkie-talkie
I'm sure
company.
Evan would love to hear that.
Hey, that is keep pitching it that way. That's a good thesis for it now. But creators have always been there. That's the thing that drives you. Anyway, that's a whole
Yeah.
other thing.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Casey, any final words?
No, this was so much fun. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Have me back sometime.
Yes, we will.
Thank you
We
for
will
joining
for
us.
sure. Well, we've got to hear the results of this Gen A project that you're working
Yes.
on. So let us know. Like, give us a shot when that's ready.
Yeah.
All right, well, everybody, this has been episode number 25 of Hip Replacement with Casey Lewis of the mighty After School newsletter. That is at afterschool.substack.com. And you should subscribe to it if you're not already, as if you're not already. Anyway, Casey, thanks so much for joining us. Kyle, great to see you. We are back next Monday for release on Tuesday, so come and see us, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.